All right, time for something a little bit different today. I have for a while now been experimenting with this little channel, making my own content, and I think I more or less started with Draft League content. That's mostly what I was doing at first with the Prismatic Draft League, which I still play in now. But today we're going to talk about me watching a Draft League, because I've been watching Draft League content since about 2016 or so. Back in the, what was that league called? I can't even remember. It's been long enough that I've forgotten the name of the first draft league that I watched. But I recently found out about this season of the Shuckle Premier League. Big 20-person YouTube draft league where they are doing a VGC format this time. And a bunch of my favorite, a bunch of my favorite YouTubers that I watch are playing in that one. And I'm really excited. It really sends me back to like the WBE and whatever I was watching before that. I'm really drawing a blank on the name of that first draft league. But maybe it'll come to us as we go. So I'm excited to watch this, and I thought I would talk about it a little bit. I have no affiliation with the league, which is why I just have an image of a Shuckle in this intro slide before we get into the rest of my presentation here. Instead of using their logo or something. I have no affiliation with the league. I would love to play in something like this someday. That would be incredible. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but yeah, it definitely is something that I've liked the idea of for a long time. And I decided after I watched their whole draft stream that I was going to try my hand at power rankings. At least this one time before the draft starts. I'm going to try some power rankings here. I'm going to tell you now, it's going to be tough. There are 20 drafts, and they're all pretty good. But yeah, that's what we're going to do here. SPL VGC season power rankings. I don't know if I'll update them throughout the season. I'd kind of like to, but honestly, I don't think it's realistic because, again, they're going to be 10 sets every week, and I'm pretty sure they're not playing on Showdown. I don't think I'm going to have time to watch every single one, and I wouldn't want to update power rankings based on content that I haven't watched. But we'll see. Maybe I'll do something. But yeah, I'd really like to engage with this league in some way, but I don't have any affiliation, so I want to be, not stepping on their toes too much. But I think doing power rankings from the outside is a pretty reasonable approach. So a few qualifiers before we go in. One, obviously, these are my opinions. Like I said, every draft is at the very least pretty good. So there's a lot of room for disagreement on the relative quality. I have not watched anyone else's power rankings. I know that there are others out there, but I just built mine from the ground up here. I definitely reserve the right to change my opinion later. And remember, even though I keep saying every draft is good, and I do mean it, if I'm ranking them 1 to 20, someone has to be in last place. And I was kind of surprised when I figured out who it is in my rankings. But okay, I guess it has to be someone, so I guess it's them. That said, obviously, I am not the end-all, be-all font of knowledge here. Pretty much everyone in this league, most of them at least, if not actually all of them, are much more accomplished players than I am in VGC or draft leagues or both. And as I've said when I review PDL drafts sometimes, they've all gone into it with a plan that they didn't disclose to me. I don't even know any of these people in this case, so it's hard for me to evaluate a draft when I don't have all the inside information on what their plan is, right? And of course, teams are going to draft, or coaches are going to draft teams that they're comfortable with. So it may be that it may be that I miss a large part of their vision or even the whole thing, or it just comes together more cleanly than I recognize just looking at the draft right now. But yeah, I want to get these power rankings out before week 1 of the regular season. I kind of waited until the last minute because I was hoping, I thought it would be easier if I could use their fan doc, but that still hasn't released, and I want to get this done today, so we're going to jump right in now. I think I've rambled long enough, and it's time to see what team I put in last place. Again, I'm going to try to hold myself back from saying this seems low for this team on like every slide. Assume that it's implied for just about all of them until like the top 5 or so. But someone did have to be last, and I have chosen that to be the Detroit Steel Wings. By the way, because they don't have a fan doc, I just took screenshots from Poke Games draft review stream. So Yeah, these are just screenshots that I took, and I added the numbers in the top right so that we don't get lost. But yeah, this is the team that I've put at number 20. That seems kind of low for this team. Again, assume that's implied for basically everything. But I don't completely see the vision here, to be honest. There are some things that I like a lot about this team. So the duo of Fluttermane and Iron Moth is pretty interesting. I actually took that duo to my first ever regional in 2023, but that was all the way back in Regulation B. There's a reason it's kind of died off now. Honestly, Iron Moth... So, I mean, it's draft, right? Not everyone is going to have all the best Iron Moth answers, but it isn't the easiest Pokemon to make work. It is fast, it's powerful, it has the Acid Spray to complement Fluttermane, but it definitely has some exploitable weaknesses. And beyond the special attack spam Fluttermane stuff, which you can also bring the Latios in on, you can use Illumise to set Tailwind, or I think it gets Fake Tears, I'm not certain. Right, that's one very strong offensive mode. I don't completely see the rest of the vision for this team beyond that. I think Gothitelle is interesting because it could trap the opponent in an unfavorable position, right? They have to bring different kinds of checks, I think, to the Fluttermane stuff, the Latios stuff, the Hariyama stuff. And so Gothitelle restricting their switches can be very limiting for them. And then, of course, Gothitelle also can set Trick Room. You can get Hariyama going with, like, Flame Orb Guts stuff, or a Belly Drum even, or Belly Drum Greedent, or Stockpile Greedent. There are other ways for this team to set up and put in work. I just don't think that it has all of the power and all of the synergy that some of the teams above it have. But again, if this is what I put in last place, it's going to be a high level of competition throughout the season. And on that note, at number 19, I have the Philadelphia Stunkies, coached by, I believe, the owner of this league. Although I haven't really watched the Shuckle Premier League very much before, so I'm not that familiar with some of the personalities involved, but quite a few of them I am, and it really sends me back to watching YouTube in like 2016. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but yeah, there's once again, this team gets dropped a little bit on the list because it has basically one mode that I like a lot, and then I don't completely see the rest of the vision. So Rapid Strike Urshifu, right? Extremely powerful, threatening Pokemon. I believe it's number 1 in VGC right now. As I'm recording this, the European International Championship is going on, and I believe Rapid Strike Urshifu is the only Pokemon with majority usage there. And if you pair that with Riolu, then you get a great prankster coaching bot giving boosts to that already extremely powerful guaranteed crit Surging Strikes. You can't even protect around it. I think if you're watching this channel, you know how Urshifu works. Riolu also complements the Landorus nicely. It can give a coaching boost to the Talonflame. Talonflame can set Tailwind for the team, and where Urshifu has issues with grass types and Landorus could have issues with grass types depending on its set, Talonflame helps to patch that up pretty nicely, as does Zapdos. But I don't completely see the vision for the rest of this team. So Alolan Persian is a strong support Pokemon. That just kind of generically is. So that much I get. I don't completely see the fit for Sinistcha here. It can set Trick Room, but there's not a great Trick Room abuser. Maybe you can make the Colossal work if you activate like a weakness policy on it, but that honestly seems like a pretty flimsy game plan to me. Frostmoth is actually not a bad support Pokemon with stuff like Tailwind, Wide Guard. I think it gets Struggle Bug, but I don't completely see the synergy. I don't completely see the synergy with Orthworm. I think giving a Shed Tail to Zapdos could be very powerful, but yeah, I don't know that there's any crazy strong setup that the Orthworm enables here, and I don't really know what the Colossal is for. I don't think I'm a big believer in it, so I definitely am a believer in like Riolu, Rapid Strike, Landorus, Talonflame stuff, throw in Zapdos maybe, but I don't completely see the vision for the rest of this team, and that's why it's down here at number 19. At number 18, oh man. Okay, so I don't think I've ever talked about this before, although I feel like a lot of my content sort of emulates his Showdown Live format, so you could probably imagine Pokeaim MD is one of the biggest influences on this channel. He was the first PokeTuber that I ever watched any significant amount, again, back in like 2015, 2016-ish. I play VGC now because I watched Wolf Glick, and I watched Wolf Glick because I watched Pokeaim, and he introduced me to Wolf Glick. So This takes me way back, seeing him play a draft league again. And of course, I've kept up a little bit with his content over the years, but I don't play singles anymore, and I'm not that interested in singles anymore. So I haven't even been watching his draft league stuff as much as I used to. But seeing him play a VGC draft, yeah, I mean, again, Pokemon is one of the biggest inspirations for this channel. And I'm really looking forward to watching a full draft season from him again. And when I talked about the first draft league that I watched, that I can't even remember the name of right now, was it the UCL? I think it was called the UCL. And he had Manaphy. It was the captain of his Bronx Beartics. Seeing him draft Manaphy again really sends me back. That said, the draft is down here. His draft is down here at number 18. I'm not a big believer. Before I decided to do straight power rankings, I guess I should have talked about the format up front. It's basically it's VGC Reg F, so no restricted Pokemon, plus most mythical Pokemon are allowed, just I think not Mew and Arceus, plus they waived Species Clause, although I don't think anyone's draft breaks Species Clause this time around. I was thinking at one point about using other criteria besides just how good I think the draft is, and I ended up deciding not to do that, but if I had, I would have given a bump to anyone who drafted mythical Pokemon, because I think if you get a chance to use Pokemon that are so unusual, so unfamiliar, have very cool designs a lot of the time. Personally, if I were in this draft, I would want to draft at least one mythical Pokemon. I would make that a goal, because how often do you get to use them? That's how I felt about Series 13 back in Sword and Shield. I was not interested in playing that format without using mythical Pokemon, because what other chance do I get? And so it's really cool to see someone draft a bunch of mythical Pokemon here. That part I like a lot. There are other parts that I like a lot in this draft as well, actually. So Annihilate is a massively strong Pokemon. If you go bulky with it, it's difficult to break, but it can also run Choice Scarf set, and in doing that, actually, it can help to enable the Trick Room setup that the rest of this team is largely built around. So Annihilate is surprisingly flexible and very hard for opponents to deal with. I think that was a very good first-round draft pick by Pokemon. The rest of the team, honestly, I think it's just okay. So Diancie is nice as a Trick Room setter, and Diamond Storm being able to boost his defense is very good. Bronzong's a decent Trick Room setter, but he's going to have to account for things like Taunt and Fake Out. Mudsdale is a good Trick Room attacker. I think Hydrapple probably is as well. I've never tried it myself, but I don't think there's some of the... I don't know that those two as sort of a Trick Room core, along with Diancie, are really necessarily able to compete with some of the stronger teams in this draft. They might well be, and again, somebody had to be in 18th place here, but I'm not the biggest believer. Manaphy is a very cool, strong Pokemon, but I'm not necessarily sure I see what the vision is for it here. It kind of feels like it's here just because it's a good Pokemon, and because, as he kept saying in the draft stream, he was drafting Pokemon that the more VGC specialized coaches were unfamiliar with. But again, I don't know necessarily how it fits in the rest of the way. I like the Sneasel pick a lot. It can help Annihilate and Mudsdale set up with the beat up, and it's not that bad a Pokemon in its own right. I like the Furret pick a lot for Follow Me. Even though Furret's not a very strong Pokemon, I actually think it makes a ton of sense for this team. Poltergeist is okay with the Hospitality. Speed Deoxys. Speed Deoxys is interesting because it's gonna have the fastest of a bunch of support techs in the game, right? Like, I think it gets Taunt, I think it gets Screens. That's all very good. It's not quite as good as Priority on those things. I'm gonna be honest, I look at this Deoxys and I feel like this is a singles mindset coming in here. I'm not sure how much value he's going to get out of it, but I could very easily be mistaken on that. Because you know what? He said he was drafting mythical Pokemon because the VGC coaches aren't familiar with them. I'm a VGC main. I'm not that familiar with mythical Pokemon at this point. So there are component pieces that I really like here, but in the end, this mostly looks to me like a Trick Room team that I'm just not sure is quite strong enough to compete. But we'll find out. At number 17, we have the Vancouver Vaporeons. This team has a ton of threats. At first, though, I felt like this team seemed a little bit... It's not a one-trick pony team. Like, I think we're now past the teams where there's not really any one-trick pony draft, but we're now past the teams where I only see one mode that I find very convincing. But this team still seems like it has one particular playstyle that it wants to play, right? It probably wants to set Tailwind with Tornadus, and then it has a bunch of strong attackers in Landorus, Baxcalibur, Sylveon, even Typhlosion with Eruption. So it does feel a little bit less well-rounded than some of the drafts above it. That said, and as I'm talking, I feel like I might have this team too low, which again, I'm trying not to say so often, but I think it's worth saying this time. But so it does feel like an opponent, if they can just disrupt this offense, they can break through this team and win. But at the same time, I'm not sure. I'm almost criticizing this team for. I'm not criticizing this team for having a bunch of strong Pokemon. I'm criticizing it for the fact that I don't necessarily see varied playstyles available here. But in the end, what you have is a ton of strong Pokemon, right? You look at the PDL, where, again, I've been playing this season, and we're at the semifinals now as I'm recording this, and a lot of the teams left just have a bunch of strong Pokemon, such that if you're their opponent, it's hard to build to cover everything. And they can layer their threats even within one team each week, so that if you stop one mode, they have another one ready to go. This is a team that can play like that as well. I just don't think it's the best version of that. Like, I think the best version of layering threats, there could be a Trick Room component, which I don't think there is here. I don't even know whether any of these Pokemon get Trick Room. Unless Sylveon does, I don't think so. I feel like this team relies quite a bit on the Tornadus because it's their speed control, and Pokemon like Quaquaval, Typhlosion, even Landorus, even Sylveon really want that speed control. The team has a few different weather modes it can play, right? With the Tornadus, you can set rain for Quaquaval, you can set snow for Baxcalibur if you really want. Typhlosion and Skiploom probably want to be playing in sun, but that puts a lot of pressure on Tornadus specifically to be the core support piece for this team. And you couldn't draft a better Pokemon for that role than Tornadus. Don't get me wrong, it's an extremely good fit, but I do think it's a little bit of a vulnerability in this team that if an opponent can remove the Tornadus quickly, Pokemon like Quaquaval and Typhlosion might struggle to keep up. So this feels like a boom and bust kind of team. It has a ton of threats, but I think that there are some pretty clear ways to shut it down. That said, I haven't even mentioned the Sarina yet. I was actually thinking about ranking this team a little lower, and then I noticed the Sarina, and that at least means that Pokemon like Landorus and Typhlosion are not going to be shut down by Fake Out, as long as you position that Sarina reasonably well. And you have a fairly strong Fire, Water, Grass core here. So yeah, there's a lot I like about this team, but I just think it does have those exploitable weaknesses that might give it a little bit more trouble. At number 16, we have I think this is called the Liyue Harbor Glazed Lilligants. I'm going to be honest, I have some trouble reading the text on this this logo, but I did join the Discord, and that was the name that I found, and I googled Liyue Harbor, and I think it's a Genshin Impact thing, so there you go. This team, I had a little bit of a tricky time evaluating this team, because I don't necessarily see obvious game plans in the way that I did with the others, except that you can, of course, run Trick Room stuff with, I guess Stantler or Trevenant has to be the Trick Room setter. They're not the best setters, but they're not the worst. And then you have Conkeldurr, and then I think Volcanion is fairly slow. I don't actually know off the top of my head. There's a Trick Room component here. There's obviously a Snow component with Alolan, Ninetales, and Glaceon. Glaceon with that base 130 attack stat, or special attack stat, can actually hit fairly hard with the Blizzard. But the main reason I have this team as high as it is just, again, having a lot of strong Pokemon. And I think the difference between this team and the Vaporeons is, again, I feel like maybe I'll be proven wrong as the season plays out, but just guessing from the draft alone, I feel like the Vaporeons are kind of locked into one particular kind of game plan. And I think there's a little bit more variety here with the Glazed Lilligants. And more than that, I think the Glazed Lilligants, to some extent, can just bring a lot of bulk, a lot of tanky Pokemon, and power through. Raging Bolt is great for that. Garchomp is good for that. Volcanion probably is, although I'm not that familiar with its stats. Therian form Tornadus is interesting. It doesn't get Prankster, but it is, I think, bulkier than Incarnate Tornadus. Yeah, and then Tinkaton is actually not that bad a steel type. People bash its attack stat, but Gigaton Hammer still hits things pretty hard, and it gets Fake Out and Feint and whatnot. So yeah, this is sort of the purest form of I've ranked them here because they just have a bunch of good Pokemon, even if I don't completely see the rest of the vision. And that's pretty much the main thing to be said about the Glazed Lilligants. I guess the other thing is, I can tell you, having run into Trevenant on the Showdown VGC ladder, if you let it get going in a bulky game plan with like Harvest, setup, passive damage over time, Leech Seed, that can be hard to break. And Pokemon like Ninetales and Tinkaton might definitely be able to help it pull that off. And even Stantler with the Intimidate. Aurora Veil, I think Aurora Veil is very valuable to this team, and that might actually be a bit of a weakness because a lot of other teams have weather that can disrupt the Aurora Veil or just strong taunt users and whatnot, but even so, just so many good Pokemon here. At number 15, what do I have there? It's the Toronto Maple Muse, coached by Sierra Dawn, another draft league. So she's an official caster, of course, but also someone I watched in draft leagues way back in the day. I watched her in the WBE because I grew up in Toronto and she was representing Toronto with her team here. So I thought, okay, I have to watch that team. And so I was watching when she beat Wolf that one time. So this is another logo that sends me way back, but yeah, I like her team a lot. Even though it's down here at number 15, I don't have to keep qualifying. You know what I'm going to say. But this is a really solid, well-rounded group of Pokemon. Wellspring Mask Ogerpon is just a really strong grass and water type with a good kit. I like the duo of Chi-Yu and Regieleki a lot because Regieleki suffers a bit from the Transistor nerf in this generation, but of course I think it's the fastest Pokemon in the game. Is Regieleki faster than Speed Form Deoxys? I think it probably is. I think it's base 200 versus base 180, maybe. But yeah, the one thing weakening Regieleki in Scarlet and Violet is that its attacks just don't hit as hard as they did in Sword and Shield. That Thunderbolt or that Electro Web just doesn't do as much damage. But just put Chi-Yu next to it, and you have a solution to that. And you can use the Electro Web to make opponents slower so that Chi-Yu will hit them very hard as well. She also has a fast Tailwind setter in Roaring Moon, a bulky Tailwind setter in Corviknight. She has the Indeedee to prevent priority from messing up her team. Wide Guard with the Gallade. The Gallade and the Indeedee can also set Trick Room, so she can go for a slower game plan if she wants. I don't necessarily know if she has all the tools to set up the Corviknight, because I don't see a ton of support. Well, there is the Follow Me Ogerpon, so that's something. So a bulky Corviknight setup mode is maybe a little bit tricky to pull off with this team, but it can work. One reason I have this team a little bit down the rankings is I don't necessarily see the vision for the Donphan or the Lycanroc. Donphan is reasonably strong and it gets sturdy. So if she can overwhelm the opponent with offense from like Chi-Yu, Regieleki, maybe Roaring Moon, then I can see Donphan being a complementary piece that's just hard for them to remove in certain situations. Otherwise, I'm not necessarily sure what it brings to the table here. And the Lycanroc, I just don't really understand Midnight Lycanroc. Like, it's just not a Pokemon that I really understand, is what I'm saying. We've seen it put in some solid work in the PDL this past season. But overall, it's just not a Pokemon that I think has anything very remarkable about it. No Guard is nice, but I mean, I guess it gives her some... I guess that and Donphan give her something to work with offensively in a Trick Room game plan along with the Gallade, but I don't completely see the vision on that one, but I do think the Regieleki Chi-Yu duo is just very strong stuff, complemented nicely by the Wellspring Mask Ogerpon, and that's enough to bump her above some of the other... bump her draft above some of the other ones here. And then I haven't even mentioned the Doxpon yet. I know Seabad was a little bit skeptical of this pick on the draft stream. I actually really love the Doxpon pick. I mentioned earlier that I took Fluttermane and Iron Moth to my first regional. Well, my second event was NAIC in 2023, and I took the duo of Chi-Yu and Doxpon to that because I was looking for an answer to the New Balance teams that were out there. And yet, Lava Plume setting up a Body Press Doxpon can actually be very powerful. It's something that a lot of people aren't used to facing. It could really throw off some other coaches in certain matchups, potentially. Doxpon does have exploitable weaknesses. Of course, you can't boost its special defense, and the set that I was running at NAIC had only Body Press to attack, so it lost to Fluttermane. There's only one Fluttermane in this draft, but there are a lot of other ghost types. But Doxpon is probably not an every matchup Pokemon, and I think as a switch up with the Chi-Yu setting it up, I think some people on the draft stream were sleeping on Doxpon. I think it could be very powerful. And it's just a very good dog, and having used it at a tournament myself, I was very happy to see it paired up with Chi-Yu here. So I like that a lot. At number 14, we have another caster, the Shoutcasting Sylveons, coached by Nekrar here. I think that we might be getting now to the strongest of the teams where I don't necessarily see more than one mode available, because I think this team has one extremely powerful playstyle that it wants to go for. Klefki can set priority screens. Ogerpon can support the team with Follow Me, and of course it has Sturdy, so it takes guaranteed more than one hit to knock it out. And then she has some extremely bulky setup Pokemon, Quiverdance, Volcarona, and what does Goodra run? Shelter? Or Iron Defense? I don't remember exactly what Shelter does, but the Hisuian Goodra is extremely hard to break if it gets any room to set up. Ogerpon and Klefki can give it room to set up. Volcarona can too. You can run Rage Powder on Volcarona and Struggle Bug. You don't have to make Volcarona a setup Pokemon its own right. Then she has another very bulky Pokemon in Suicune, which can set Tailwind for her, or run some other support options like Snarl. She has Zarude. I don't remember exactly what Jungle Healing does, but I know Zarude is able to heal the team, and it also gives her a strong Fire, Water, Grass core with Volcarona and Suicune. And then, of course, if all else fails, Palmet can revive a teammate. So you might put a lot of resources into breaking Goodra, but then the Palmet is there to bring it right back. So I don't necessarily see... I guess I don't know if I can call it one mode when I think the Volcarona is flexible in how it can play. I don't necessarily see a second playstyle for this team besides bulky setup, and so I think all of her opponents are going to be prepared for bulky setup. I guess they do then have to contend with something like a fast Ogerpon. Mismagius actually could be a great sleeper pick here because there aren't a ton of Pokemon that resist Ghost, and Mismagius doesn't hit super hard, but it hits hard enough to be a problem. You can kind of... I've had it in the PDL before. You can kind of just slap Choice Specs or a Scarf on it, and it can open some holes. So there are some tools that she has here, but... Again, I think this, unless I'm forgetting something for higher up on the list, I think that the Sylveons are placed here because this is the strongest version of a team where I just kind of see one mode or one playstyle that they probably want to run most weeks. I'm not a big believer in Slitherwing. It kind of feels like a first impression merchant, and first impression is pretty easy to play around. But it might be an interesting sort of counterpick into some Sun modes from opposing teams, maybe. I don't know. It has a lot of exploitable flaws for sure. And I don't necessarily see what the Lapras is about. She could do like a bulky Perish Song endgame if she wears down the opponent's first two Pokemon. Or it could just click Sheer Cold with a lot of supports to help it stay on the field for a long time. That actually might be what the Lapras is for, but of course that's a high variance plan, so... I don't know that Lapras or Slitherwing, I don't know that I see them necessarily bringing a lot to the table, but these first 6 draft picks, 7 actually with the Palmet, are good stuff for sure. At number 13, I have the Miami Donphans. Honestly, maybe the Sylveon should be above the Donphans, I'm not sure. The Donphans have some of the best Pokemon in VGC, for sure. This is another team where, I guess to some extent I'm placing them where they are, in part just for having good Pokemon. Like you see Incineroar and Amoonguss, and you're expecting a lot of quality, right? And then Primarina hits extremely hard and complements Incineroar nicely. You have the Serperior for the Grass type, and as people pointed out in the draft stream, there are the 3 starters here, so they can do Pledge combos if they want. The strongest almost certainly being the Swamp combo, because 1, it's very good speed control, and 2, it'll use Serperior's speed and Primarina's special attack, so it'll hit extremely hard when they set it up. But they could do a Fire Pledge combo with Incineroar if they really want. Then you have a Spothra, which of course can passively boost its speed, so good for speed control in that sense. And use Lumina Crash to lower opponent's special defense and open holes for Primarina and Serperior. This can make it even easier to snowball Serperior, which already can snowball pretty easily, with Contrary giving it a +2 boost every time it lands a Leaf Storm. And that's all before I mention Hydreigon and Iron Valiant, both of which are extremely strong and flexible Pokemon. Hydreigon, another very strong special attacker, can benefit from that Espathra, and load that up with Primarina and Serperior, and you're probably overwhelming a lot of opponents. And then Iron Valiant, it can also be a strong special attacker, but it doesn't have to be. It's extremely flexible in how it plays. It gets support like Coaching and Wide Guard. It can be a physical attacker, right? Iron Valiant has a bit of a jack-of-all-trades issue in VGC. But in a draft league where you want those flexible Pokemon that can play a lot of different ways in different matchups week in, week out, Iron Valiant is probably one of the best Pokemon available. And as I talk through it, it's kind of incredible that he got it in round 9. Okay, as I talk through it, maybe this team actually should be higher, not lower. But I did place it where I did for a reason, which is that I don't completely understand some of the other pieces. So I think the Drifblim is good. I think Drifblim is a pretty reasonable Tailwind setter, especially with Unburden. He doesn't have a super obvious way to activate the Unburden. He does. He doesn't have passive terrain, but he can set electric terrain with Iron Valiant. Superior probably learns grassy terrain, I'm not certain, and it's fast. So the Driftbloom might actually be a better pick than I thought as I was initially going through these. With Unburden activated, it's an extremely fast Tailwind setter, and it gets supports like Will-O-Wisp and Strength Sap as well. Amoonguss, of course, can redirect attacks away from the offensive Pokemon to make their job somewhat easier. It also can put opponents to sleep, though not if you set up electric terrain. I'm not a huge believer in the Vikavolt. I don't think this team has a Trick Room mode. Maybe something learns it, but this team mostly wants to play quickly, and Vikavolt is very slow. It can hit extremely hard, but that does make it a bit exploitable. And I don't really see what Rhydon is here for. Obviously, Rhydon is a counter to electric types mostly, but I'm not sure why this team needed that specifically. All that said, I actually think I might have put this team too low. We'll see if I change my mind at all as we go through the rest of the rankings. But yeah, at face value, I looked at this team. I was like, I don't completely believe in the Vikavolt. I don't really know what Rhydon is here for. Incineroar is an incredible Pokemon, but I don't know that I don't know how much it does for this team. And I think I was missing, actually, that he had the fast electric terrain with Iron Valiant to get the Driftbloom going. But this is an extremely powerful offensive team. Yeah, I might want to move it higher. We'll see. Let's find out who's number 12. The Montreal Ice Cues. Okay, yeah. So this is... I could maybe move the Palafins above this team. But I'm not sure, because this team is built on a Pokemon that I'm not familiar with, and that, of course, is Hoopa Unbound. Hoopa Unbound has the stats of a restricted Pokemon, and is, I believe, the best Psy Spam attacker available. My understanding is this is an error. This is actually female Indeedee, which is even better for this team. I don't think male Indeedee would be a terrible pairing with Hoopa, but yeah, female Indeedee able to set up that psychic terrain, and then also redirect attacks away from Hoopa. Give it a helping hand. Set Trick Room for it if you want, because I don't think Hoopa is especially fast. I mean, the Hoopa just goes crazy on this team. And then you have Okidogi nicely covering some of its weaknesses with that fighting typing. You have Skyform Shaman. Does it get Tailwind? I'm not sure, but either way, it's a very fast special attacker to complement the Hoopa very nicely. Opposing setup modes might run into trouble with the Unaware Skeledirge. You can slap a booster energy onto, what's this called? Sandy Shocks to make it extremely strong. You have a Rain Duo in Politoed and Golduck. And then Alchemy with Decorate, I'm not a huge believer in, but you get a Decorate into Hoopa especially, but also Okidogi or Shaman. Or Skeledirge, make the Torch Song that much faster. Yeah, this team can run away with some games. And then the Glalie with the Moody, it's very high variance, but maybe it cheeses a set at some point. I actually think I would drop the Ice Cues below the Palafins, or the Miami Palafins or later. I actually think I would drop the Ice Cues below the Donphans now that I'm looking over it again. So let's say Ice Cues 13, Donphans 12. But that Hoopa is going to be a menace for a lot of teams to deal with, for sure. At number 11... the Brooklyn Bengals, coached by Moxie Boosted. This is a wild draft. I'm glad that I don't have to play against it. As much as I said that I'd love to play in a league like this someday, it's nice that I don't have to face this draft. This is another very bulky team, but it has some solid ways to do damage that are going to be hard for opponents to deal with for sure. So... if you can get Aurora Veil up with the duo of Abomasnow and Iron Bundle, that might be easier said than done, but if you can, then King Gambit is very hard to break, Komodo is very hard to break, Arcanine is very hard to break. Arcanine and Palafin can kind of pivot around, play the matchups for them, and then of course the Palafin, once you pivot it out, it becomes one of the strongest heavy-hitting Pokemon in the game. Komodo has, as we've seen from the PDL, various setup modes, all of which make it bulkier and hard to take down. And then you have the Pecharunt. So again, love to see mythical Pokemon being drafted, but Pecharunt has, I think, decent bulk, at least on the physical side, and is good at spreading poison. With the Poison Puppeteer, it will poison and confuse opponents, so it can cheese some free turns there and make it harder to break the likes of Abomasnow, Komodo, And again, Arcanine and Kingambit. Iron Bundle is also just one of the fastest Pokemon in the game, especially with the booster energy. It was pointed out in the draft stream that it could set electric terrain for the Alolan Raichu. Alolan Raichu already decent with as fake out support, but there's a very fast mode available there. Comfey with the floral healing can keep Kommo-o, Arcanine, Pecharunt, Kingambit all healthy, make it yet harder for opponents to break them. And I don't know if this Cleffa is going to last. My understanding from the draft stream is that Moxie Boosted drafted it thinking it gets Follow Me. I thought it gets Follow Me too. I had to fact check when PokeGames chat said that it doesn't. So yeah, Cleffa is a little bit of a misfire in this draft. I don't know if that slot is going to remain that Pokemon. But yeah, overall, difficult team to break through for sure. And that wraps up the bottom half, right? This being number 11. There's still half of the teams to get through. Oh my god. Okay, at number 10, we have the Toronto Tyrants, coached by another name that sends me way back, Numb Nexus. Someone I haven't watched in quite possibly years, but used to watch in, I think it was called the UCL and other leagues back in the day. And hey, I don't know where Nexus is from, but representing my hometown with this draft team. By the way, meant to say it earlier, before I thought to just join the Discord to confirm all the team names, I was going through some of these coaches' channels, looking at their past draft videos for, the names that the logos that don't have team names in them or where I couldn't read them, like the Glaze Lilligants. Just try to go through their past videos to see what their teams were called. Some of these coaches really don't say their team names out loud very often, and Nexus was one of those. I went through a few of his videos before I could figure this one out, and then I thought to join the Discord. This is a pretty simple team compared to some of the others, but I think it's simple but extremely effective. This is a Sunroom team, and it has a bunch of the best Sunroom Pokemon piled onto it. So for the Sun component, you have Torkoal, of course, best Sunsetter available with Drought. And then you have Charizard, the KO leader in the current Prismatic Draft League season. Just a monstrously powerful Pokemon if you get it going in that strong sunlight. And of course it has exploitable weaknesses, but you really can't give Charizard an inch, is what I'm saying. It's kind of been the lesson, right? This is a higher power format than the PDL one, so Charizard is not going to go as crazy, but Charizard doesn't need much opportunity to go pretty crazy. And then you have the Hisui and Lilligant with Chlorophyll. It can do after use stuff with Torkoal or even Charizard. It can support with Sleep Powder. It can attack itself. I think it has some other techs it can bring. And then for the room part of Sunroom, oh, hold on, I shouldn't ignore the Walking Wake, right? Water type attacker that's actually made stronger by strong sunlight. And then for the room part, you have one of the best Trick Room setters in the game in Porygon 2, one of the strongest Pokemon in the game in Iron Hands to take good advantage of that Trick Room. Of course, the Torkoal takes advantage as well. All of that is supported by Clefable, which is a strong redirector. It gets unaware, so opponents' setup modes might find it hard to break. And it can create openings for Iron Hands, Walking Wake, and especially Charizard to just go crazy. So those first 7 Pokemon, again, it's such a familiar core. It's something so simple that all these coaches are going to know well, but there's a reason that it's such a familiar core. It's good. That said, to me, the draft starts to make a little bit less sense in the last few picks. I do like the Bruxish pick because it's another Trick Room setter, and perhaps more importantly, it has Dazzling to shut down opposing priority. And Dazzling, I think, does a lot for this team because some teams are going to have Prankster Taunt as a way to try to deny Trick Room, like the team of Tornadus or the Thundurus that we'll see later. So Bruxish can't be shut down by those, at least not in that way. But also, Charizard is reasonably fast, not especially bulky. Lilligant is extremely fast, not bulky. Walking Wake is fast and not very bulky. So there are a lot of possible priority targets. Bruxish is going to make it a lot harder to deal with those Pokemon. It slots in nicely along with Clefable as a support for the main attackers on this team. I don't really know what the Malamar is for. I don't really see the vision with that Pokemon. And Misdreavus, having drafted it a couple times in the PDL, it's okay. It's got some stats, and it's got some support moves it can run, but I don't think it brings a lot to the table here. So it's really just those 2 picks, Malamar and Misdreavus, where I don't really see the vision. But otherwise, this is a team that a lot of coaches are going to understand relatively well, but it should be extremely strong and able to rack up some wins all the same. At number 9, I have the Melbourne Rotoms. Coached, of course, by Aaron Cybertron Zhang, one of my go-to VGC YouTubers, and a great caster at official events as well. I tried not to be biased here in favor of better players. I tried to rank just the drafts and not account for the players in my rankings. I don't think I was able to do that perfectly. I think that it turns out it's pretty hard to be perfectly unbiased when you're ranking things. But of course, I do have some VGC mains further down the list. That said, Aaron Zhang, I think this team might have gotten to this spot a little bit on his reputation as a player, his strength as a player, even though I tried to keep that out of my thinking. But it's also a really strong draft. So maybe never mind everything that I just said, right? It has two of the best support Pokemon in the game in Grimmsnarl and Cresselia. Grimmsnarl with the Prankster screens, Fake Out, Parting Shot, Spirit Break if you want. A lot of different ways to make its opponents harder to beat, its teammates harder to beat. And then Cresselia, one of the bulkiest Pokemon in the game, great Trick Room setter, has Lunar Blessing to help keep its teammates healthy. And then Aaron has two great Trick Room attackers in Ursaluna and Therian form Enamorus. I mean, this is how you build a Trick Room mode, right? Ursaluna could click Earthquake, no problem, next to Cresselia or Landorus? Enamorus. Cresselia has Levitate, Enamorus is a flying type. Neither one takes damage from Earthquake, and of course there's only one Rillaboom out there, so a lot of opponents will not have grassy terrain. That Earthquake is much more consistent, or should be, in this format than it is in VGC. There's a little bit of anti-synergy with Cresselia and Ursaluna in that Ursaluna probably wants to burn itself with a Flame Orb, and Cresselia's Lunar Blessing will cure the burn. But that's not a big deal. There were some very strong teams in like Reg D that used that duo. And yeah, they're just going to be extremely hard to break. Enamorus is going to hit very hard next to Ursaluna, and again, doesn't have to worry about the Earthquake. Grimmsnarl can make them all the harder to break with moves like Reflect, Light Screen, and Parting Shot. Then you have the Vivillon, which gets Friend Guard. It gets Rage Powder, it gets Sleep Powder, which can be boosted by Compound Eyes if you're not running Friend Guard. And it's another flying type that can also sit next to Ursaluna. And then after that, Aaron has a bunch of ways to weaken opposing physical attacks, which is interesting. He has double Intimidate from the Torracat and the Tauros, and then Wo-Chien with the Tablets of Ruin. Of course, they're Fire, Water, Grass. You can probably position at least one of them in... You can probably make at least one of them effective in most positions. Torracat gets a lot of the same support kit as Incineroar. Tauros is another strong physical attacker that doesn't rely on Trick Room to be fast and hit hard. And Aaron, by the way, also has a Tailwind option with the Vivillon. So you can go fast Enamorus. You can go relatively fast Bear. It doesn't do it as well as Blood Moon or Saluna, but that is a real option. And then a very fast Pokemon in the Spectrier. But yeah, it's interesting that he kind of loaded up late in the draft on ways to deal with physical attackers. I'm not completely sure I understand that, but at face value, it does make a fair bit of sense because you can maybe prioritize Light Screen on the Grimmsnarl. You can prioritize Special Bulk on the Cresselia and the Enamorus, and maybe the Ursaluna, you know, depending on how you build week to week. But it definitely I don't know how to say it. I keep thinking it creates flexibility or gives him more options, but no, that's not it. It narrows down some of his decision making. It gives him a way to not have to worry as much about physical bulk on some of these Pokemon, which could be extremely effective. Spectre, I'm not a huge believer in. It's a fast Will-O-Wisp user, so that's another possible nerf to physical attackers. It is also a hard-hitting Ghost type, and Ghost types can be hard to deal with. And it's a fast Pokemon, which is a good mix-up there. So actually, never mind. I'm talking myself into believing in Spectre. I do think this team is mostly fairly dependent on the Trick Room mode, but it probably has the best Trick Room mode in the draft, so that's not a huge weakness. It makes the top half of my power rankings for a reason. But, you know, there definitely is counterplay that other coaches will have available. But actually, yeah, I mean, as I look over it, this team is going to be really hard to break. So the fact that I have it down at number 9, let's just call it a testament to how strong all these drafts are. This has been an incredible draft throughout. It's going to be a great season to watch, I think. I don't know if I'll make any more content on it because, again, I'm not affiliated with the league. Feels a little bit iffy, but also relatively not iffy feeling things like power rankings might take work that I don't have time for, but I'm definitely going to be watching this team and a bunch of others, and I'm really looking forward to it. But we know that already. All right, number 8. the Baton Rouge Butterfrees. I love this draft. This is... So I'm trying to be... I'm trying to make an honest assessment of what I think is... of how I think the drafts rank against each other. And you can see this is not a 1. This is an 8. But when we consider other things, when we consider vibes, expected play style, this is my favorite draft of the lot, I think. Once again, we have a duo that I'm familiar with. I've taken Whimsicott and Regidrago to a major tournament, last year's NAIC. Regidrago is such a good Pokemon, and I don't know, I really love it. It's really grown on me, especially since I took it to an international championship. But that Dragon's Maw boosted Dragon Energy or Draco Meteor is going to shred some teams as the season goes on. And then, of course, it's paired with the Whimsicott for Tailwind support, possible Fake Tears support. Whimsicott can open holes with, like, Taunt and Encore. It can even run Cotton Spore. It can, Moonblast things that might be threatening. And you have a Fairy Dragon Steel Core because Jirachi is the third pick. And I honestly, I haven't really kept up with the current state of Jirachi's move pool, but I think Jirachi makes a ton of sense on this team. It has, base 100 across the board. That's not a stat. That stat value isn't what it used to be, but it's perfectly good for something like a Choice Scarf or even a bulky support set. And, it's no Zacian. Of course, I was using Zacian and Regidrago at NAIC, but I think Jirachi for this format with no restricted Pokemon is one of the best steel types that you could get to complement Regidrago. I believe it also gets Life Dew, so it can help keep Regidrago healthy or other teammates. I think Regidrago really benefits from a Steel-type partner to help it deal with fairies, and I think Jirachi is one of the best you can get here. That's the gist. Then you have Weavile, very fast fake-out attacker. Then you have Terrakion, another fast attacker that can pair well with the Whimsicott for the classic Terracott duo, with Whimsicott using Beat Up to give Terrakion a bunch of justified boosts. So there are two very powerful fast modes that opponents have to worry about here, right? Whimsicott Terrakion or Whimsicott Regidrago. You could easily bring all three of those Pokemon and make your opponent try to figure it out at preview, because there are going to be different answers to those two different modes. They want to try to answer it with, a Steel type. Well, you have the Fighting type Terrakion covering that already, but there's also the Chandelure. Another extremely strong attacker. It has typing that complements Regidrago and to an extent Terrakion, and it can set Trick Room, so you can go slow Regidrago if you want, relatively slow Jirachi. And then Weavile, it also gets Beat Up and it gets Fake Out, but it gets Icy Wind too, by the way, and it's very fast, so it could give you some speed control in addition to Whimsicott, but it's also just going to hit things hard. Hisuian Zoroark can play all kinds of tricks. It has a decent support kit itself with stuff like Icy Wind and Will-O-Wisp, but also, your opponent loads up on answers to Regidrago, and then oops, it's not really Regidrago, or it's not really Terrakion, or it's not really Jirachi, or it's not really Chandelure. Their Ghost type attack into Chandelure or Jirachi did nothing. There are so many mind games you can play with Hisuian Zoroark. Of course, it takes a certain kind of thinking, but I watched That's a Plus One's the coach's draft recap, and I think he's in the right mindset to make good use of Hisuian Zoroark. And then Electivire gets Follow Me. It's basically a Follow Me bot, I think. Of course, I've had Magmortar in the PDL this season, and one thing I found tricky with Magmortar is that I didn't have a whole lot to do with it outside of just click Follow Me in a lot of matchups, but Follow Me is so good that it could justify bringing this Pokemon at least some weeks anyway. And it can help keep Regidrago healthy, or Terrakion, or even Chandelure or Weavile. The Gliscor, that's +1 explained the Gliscor as a pick to help deal with the ground weakness that Terrakion, Jirachi, Electivire, and Chandelure all brought to this team. So that makes decent sense. But yeah, I don't necessarily see a specific vision with Gliscor, but it's a strong Pokemon. It's another Tailwind setter besides Whimsicott. It can hit fairly hard in its own right. It has a few different tricks up its sleeve. And then the Wartortle, what is the Wartortle for? I think it gets Fake Out. It could do some Aqua Jet weakness policy stuff if you really want. I don't remember exactly what the Wartortle is for, but honestly, I wouldn't sleep on Wartortle. It's probably pretty bulky with an Eviolite. It has a few ways it can set up. It has a few ways it can support its teammates. For a last pick, I think it's not like crazy, but pretty solid. But yeah, I am so looking forward to watching Regidrago hopefully just shred some teams as the season goes on. And there's so many other threats with the Jirachi, the Terrakion, the Chandelure, the Weavile. Like I said, I don't think this is the single strongest draft. Obviously, this is an 8. But this is my favorite draft in the league. I think pretty clearly. That said, there are 7 that I ranked above it. So at number 7, we have the Mediterranean Mimikyus. This team has, I'm going to say this team I think has a little bit of the same problem as the Vaporeons that I talked about earlier. But let's talk about the strengths first. So they got the other Shifu form, single striker Shifu. Just going to hit things extremely hard, ignore, protect, and crit whenever it wants. They have one of the fastest threats in Dragapult, which of course has that clear body, so it doesn't have to worry about Intimidate or things like Icy Wind or Electro Web, and it can run a physical or special set. Iron Crown is one of the stronger size spam attackers. Entei is a very strong attacker with the Sacred Fire or the Extreme Speed. Araquanid can play well in an opponent's Trick Room, and it's good wide guard support and a hard Pokemon to take down. It complements Entei nicely with that water typing and the water bubble. Florges can share like a Choice Band or a Choice Scarf with something like Urshifu or Regigigas or Entei. Yanmega is one of the better Tailwind setters available, I think, for being, it doesn't get priority Tailwind, but with Speed Boost, it can pretty easily get the fastest Tailwind. So there are a lot of different pieces that, there are a lot of different threatening ways that this team can be built out week by week. But I think for better or for worse, a lot comes down to the Meowstic. Meowstic, as the Prankster support Pokemon, I think is kind of a centerpiece for a lot of this team. It can set priority Psychic Terrain for the Iron Crown. It can, I think, skill swap the Regigigas. I think you can skill swap Slow Start away. At least I couldn't find evidence that you can't. And that makes Regigigas a very strong attacker. Of course, Regigigas can also play some support with Wide Guard and stuff, even if you don't do that. But there are a couple of different ways to get the Regigigas going here. There's the Meowstic, and there's also the Coughing with neutralizing gas. I don't know that Coughing is going to have the same kind of field presence that Weezing does, but it certainly seems like a reasonable option. And, okay, there may be a little bit of anti-synergy with Meowstic, Iron Crown, and Entei, because Entei can't just click Extreme Speed if you set up the Psychic Terrain. But, well, it can in Flying types. But, you have Yanmega Tailwind. You have Entei just hitting extremely hard with Sacred Fire, burning things. And again, you have Dragapult, it's a very fast Pokemon. You have Urshifu. So I think the only significant issue that I have with this team is that some of the modes are fairly dependent on the Meowstic, but Meowstic is really not a bad Prankster support Pokemon, so I definitely think they can make that work. As I talk through the rankings now, I think maybe this team could be a bit lower than it is. I'm not sure that number 7 is really the best spot for it. But yeah, I do like how a lot of these pieces fit together. I just think that some of them are kind of dependent on certain supports. Again, the Coughing, to get the Regigigas going, you might need to keep Coughing around then in some situations. The Yanmega, there may be ways that opponents can deal with it. But there is a lot that I like about this draft. At number 6, the Miami Palafins. This is another one that's just pretty straightforward, but it's just so strong that I think it works fine anyway. It's just a bunch of different threats mashed together. But you have the Hearthflame Mask Ogerpon is just one of the strongest Pokemon in the draft. It's as simple as that. It gets the attack boost when it terrestrializes. It has a high crit chance on Ivy Cudgel. Volbeat can set Tailwind for it, and also can set Sunny Day. Or it can use Follow Me to enable Keldeo to hit fast and hard, Excadrill to hit fast and hard in a Sandstorm. They want to bring certain kinds of Pokemon to answer Excadrill and Tyranitar. Ogerpon and Keldeo then are going to be hard to deal with. This is another largely fast offensive team. They have a few different Tailwind setters, but I think the synergy between a lot of these pieces is so good. Like an Excadrill, Ogerpon, Keldeo mode in Sand is going to be really hard for opponents to deal with. And then the Tyranitar can play a bulkier game. You have the Salamence with Intimidate and versatility in how it attacks. The Gardevoir gets, of course, as we've seen from the Cryogonals of the PDL this season, the Gardevoir gets Telepathy, so it doesn't have to worry about Excadrill clicking Earthquake next to it, and it can help Excadrill deal with fighting types and the like. You have Kilowattrel able to play Discquake games with Excadrill. This is another team that, as I'm going over it again, might be a little bit high, but I just really believe in the synergy of this offensive core. And, you play that kind of offensive game plan, you have to get a lot of things right. I haven't even talked about the Chinchino with Skill Link, but you have to get a lot of things right. But if they can, then there's just nothing that can consistently stop this team, or at least not much. And the Volbeat might be a little bit of a weakness because it's their best Tailwind setter, but no, they have 2 other good Tailwind setters. They can bring Tailwind on multiple Pokemon in a week if they want. They might have trouble with some of the Trick Roomy teams that we've gone over, but with Tyranitar and Ogerpon, even not even necessarily, and Gardevoir as well. Yeah, so I might have this team a little bit high, but it is very powerful for sure. At number 5, the Oklahoma City Thunderbolts, coached, I believe, by Cloverbells, someone I've been watching a fair bit lately. This is a pretty nice, well, I was going to say it's sort of a Sunroom team. No, it's definitely a Sunroom team. That's a Tail Room team for sure, but it has a Sun component as well. So it has one of the strongest Trick Room cores in the game with Farigiraf and Blood Moon Ursaluna. It has Brute Bonnet, also able to nicely take advantage of the Trick Room and run a similar support kit to Amoonguss, but with more physical offense and dark typing. It has Glastrier, able to hit pretty hard at Trick Room. You also, of course, can run Priority Tailwind with the Murkrow. Blood Moon Ursaluna can play nicely in that, so can Hisuian Typhlosion. Maybe you could even get Glastrier going in Tailwind in some matchups. The Murkrow can set Sunny Day for Typhlosion, Great Tusk, and Brute Bonnet, so there are a ton of synergies on this team, and all of it is nicely supported by the Smeargle, which can run pretty much any support move and make it hard for an opponent to shut you down quickly. Again, like I said with some other teams, the Murkrow might be a little bit of a weakness because the Murkrow is the only Tailwind. Actually, no, Smeargle gets Tailwind, but you know what I mean. Murkrow is the only good Tailwind setter here and the only good Sunny Day setter. So if you're relying on either or both of those for your game plan, then Murkrow might be a little bit of a weak spot. But, I mean, you slap an Eviolite or even a Focus Sash on Murkrow, and it's not that easy for opponents to remove it quickly before it gets those Prankster supports set up. And, of course, you could play a Tail Room game plan even within an individual game, have Farigiraf in the back, get the Trick Room going later. After Typhlosion has done its job, or Great Tusk or something. There's a lot of flexibility in how to play this Blood Moon Ursaluna. So this is just a really solid team with a bunch of strong synergies throughout, and the flexible speed control game plans, I think, really put it over the top compared to some of the teams that I've ranked below it. The only pick that I don't really understand here is Toxapex. I think Toxapex is just not that good in this format, but hey, we'll find out. And number 4, I have the Golden State Gallades. This is another, I don't know what's going on behind this Magmar, but it's not my problem. This is another draft that I really, really love. This might be my second favorite. I do think that it has a little bit of the one-trick pony problem that I talked about in some of the lower rankings, but in this case, the one trick is so good that to an extent I'm willing to overlook it. This team is centered on the Chen Pao, and it has a bunch of fast and priority physical attackers to benefit from that support. So Chen Pao itself is a fast physical attacker with priority that benefits from Sword of Ruin, but then you have Teal Mask Ogerpon, which before it terastallizes gets Defiant, so you can't just intimidate through that. I think it gets Defiant, and after it terastallizes, it gets a speed boost. You have Dragonite, able to just click Extreme Speed. You have Azumarill, able to just click Aqua Jet with a Choice Band, or even set up a Belly Drum, and you have 2 Follow Me users to enable that Belly Drum in Ogerpon and Magmar. Magmar is a bulky redirector, gives this team a lot of openings to just keep clicking those strong physical attacks. Scrafty brings Intimidate, and I think Fake Out support, and maybe some other kinds of support. Then you have a strong... two strong special attackers in Therian Thundurus and Delphox, and I think those can to some extent be counter picks into opposing game plans. Like Delphox can take advantage of a Sun or Psy Spam game plan, playing that game fairly well itself. Thundurus, I feel like this is a team. I don't know what on this team gets Rain Dance, but I feel like there's a sort of a sleeper rain team here with the Azumarill having its water attacks boosted, Thundurus having Wild Bolt Storm accuracy boosted, Dragonite, it doesn't even have to click Extreme Speed. That's probably the best role it has on this team, but it can run like a Hurricane set in Rain. So if they ever play against a Rain team, they have some ways to flip the script there. They may be able to set up their own Rain with something. I'm not necessarily sure whether something here gets good Rain Dance. But again, the main thing here is just get the Chen Pao in, get the Sword of Ruin, And then Ogerpon, Dragonite, Azumarill, and Chien-Pao itself all hit opponents extremely hard. And then you have complementary electric types and fire type with the Thundurus and the Delphox. Even if you don't give them their specific supports, they still bring some good synergy to this team. The only pick that I don't like here is Skarmory. I think that Skarmory is just not very good. It does give them a steel type and a little bit of bulk to fall back on in some positions, but honestly, I don't think it's going to deliver much value. But yeah, this team is as high as it is because Chien-Pao, Ogerpon, Dragonite, Magmar, Azumarill is just so good, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it put in work. And now we just have the top 3 to get through, which is good because I've been talking for an hour. I did not think this would take nearly this long. But at number 3, I have the Jubilife Piplups, coached by James Beck. And this team is just unreal. So I watched the draft stream, and apparently what happened is the entire draft was based on points. So every coach, as you've probably noticed, even though I didn't say, had to draft 9 or 10 Pokemon. And they had a points budget for every slot. So instead of a tier list like we use in the PDL, every Pokemon had a point value. It's kind of a more flexible way to set up the draft because there are a lot of different point values you can use. It's kind of like having a lot of tiers and some flexibility in how the coaches put them together. But apparently what they did here, and I don't know how this ever got through, whoever makes these decisions, but apparently they priced Dondozo relatively low, but put a somewhat higher price on Tatsugiri so that if you want to pair it with Dondozo, that comes with a cost. Which I think is, I'm going to be honest, I think was a mistake because Dondozo is a lot better without Tatsugiri than Tatsugiri is without Dondozo. So Dondozo, I don't have the prices in front of me right now, unfortunately. I do have access to the fan doc, but I didn't think to have it open while I'm talking through this. But if Dondozo really was relatively low priced, I think that was an oversight, and it was the steal of the draft. And James Beck has put some familiar complementary pieces again around it. Of course, he's a veteran VGC player, also someone I watch relatively often. So you have the Glimmora, poisoning opponents, making Dondozo harder to break. You have Tinglu, which can even pair with Dondozo without Tatsugiri for a bulky mode that's hard to break, but also... Yeah, I mean, that's probably the main thing that it's here for. But if you get some Toxic Orb Tatsugiri stuff going or something, then Tinglu... with Dondozo, they could even both click Fissure. That would be pretty silly. But yeah, that can be very hard to break through. You got the complementary special attacker with Goldengo, being a bulky setup Pokemon, hard to break through. Complemented by Tinglu, weakening special attacks, by Intimidate, Blaze Breed, Tauros, weakening physical attacks. Dondozo can form a Fire, Water, Grass core with Tauros and Meowscarada. Oh yeah, Meowscarada's here. It's a very fast Grass and Dark type with a guaranteed crit attack, and also your usual dark type shenanigans, knockoff and sucker punch and so on. I think Meowscarada also gets Trick Room, so if he wants, he can, Goldengo, Tinglu, Dondozo are all not very fast Pokemon. Meowscarada itself is, but I mean, there is a viable plan there. He has a priority Tailwind setter in Fletchinder. I was going to say Baby Talonflame, but really that's Fletchling. Teenage Talonflame. So it has to be at full HP to get the priority, but yeah, there is that Tailwind component. Tauros and Meowscarada, and by the way, Incarnate Form Enamorous. Very strong offensive fairy type, can go kind of crazy in Tailwind, so can Goldengo if the matchup is right. So he has, not the best speed control pieces, but he does still have flexible speed control. But more importantly, this team is just so hard to break through with Pokemon like Goldengo, Tinglu, and Dondozo. And then Glimmora enabling them just like it does in VGC. The only reason that I have this team ranked outside of the top 2, so it is at number 3 and it's not number 1, is that there are a lot of Dondozo answers in the rest of the field. So we've seen Skeledirge, we've seen Clefable, we've seen Amoonguss. There are some Haze Pokemon like Murkrow that I didn't call out at the time, but they're out there. So, I mean, James Beck is a very good player. I think he's going to make excellent use of the Dondozo-Tatsugiri duo. But it's not a slam dunk. There are a lot of other coaches are going to have some kind of answer to it, and he's going to have to play carefully around those answers. And obviously this team isn't all in on Dondozo, but it is fairly centered on Dondozo. So it may be that opponents can, if they can stop the Dondozo Tatsugiri mode, then they can break through the rest of the team. Maybe. And again, he doesn't have the best speed control, although he does have enough speed control to make it work. But none of that's going to be easy for opponents, guaranteed. So this draft is, yeah, it's not quite the best, I think, but it's scary, and it's another one that I'm glad I don't have to face. And finally, there's the difficult choice of number 1. Right? If you know the teams, you know what the top 2 are. One of them had to go above the other, and it was not this one. At number 2, I have the New York Eveltals. Okay, I already said that the Butterfrees have my favorite draft. And the Gallades are up there too. This is one of my top 3 favorite drafts. Let's just say that. This is incredible. And I think this is... So the only thing this is missing is the Chan Power, right? Like the Gallades, I give a lot of credit because they have that passive buff to their physical damage with the Sword of Ruin and then all that priority and stuff. But this team can set up Howl and Coaching and just run with it, and it's also going to overwhelm opponents with physical attacks. Gouging Fire can boost its speed with booster energy. It gets Howl. Raikou, already fast, gets Howl. By the way, also gets stuff like Snarl, and I think it gets Electro Web. So Raikou... People in the draft stream chat were sleeping on Raikou. It may be outclassed in VGC, but in a draft format like this, Raikou is really not a bad support Pokemon. Plus, it can hit hard-ish with electric type attacks itself. But yeah, it has a lot of different support it can run. Both of them can set up Howl for, pick your physical attacker, Gouging Fire itself, Rillaboom, Sneasler, even Mimikyu can be a fairly strong physical attacker and hard to break thanks to the disguise. Sneasler can set up Coaching for Rillaboom or Gouging Fire. You want to bring Intimidate to deal with that? Oops, there's Competitive Melodic. Now you've given that a boost, now it's an offensive threat. And by the way, Fire, Water, Grass Core with this, Gouging Fire, and Rillaboom. Very strong Pokemon of all of those types. Want to throw on an Electric type too? You got Raikou. Want Fake Out support? Sneasler. Want Dire Claw variants? Sneasler. Want Trick Room? Mimikyu, one of the best Trick Room setters. Rillaboom, not that fast. Melodic, not very fast. Registeel, slow Pokemon. Bulky, can set up with Iron Defense, can do body press stuff, so there's a slow, bulky game plan available here too. Haven't even talked about Galarian Moltres. You want a Pokemon that shuts down some of those offensive ghost types like Spectre and Mismagius. Galarian Moltres doesn't care about taking hits from them. It's bulky. It's another special attacker to round things out. It gets a Berserk boost if you knock it below half HP, so it can't be careless with how you deal with that, right? It's just such a well-rounded, so strong core of Pokemon. It has a few different game plans it can run. You can do Nasty Plot Moltres stuff. Again, you can do Iron Defense Registeel stuff, Trick Room setting for Mimikyu, but it also has that core... the team has a clear identity. Like, the number one thing that I see when I look at this is physical spam with Rillaboom, Gouging Fire, Sneasler, strong priority, fast... Again, Raikou can enable that nicely. Mimikyu can take part, and Melodic is a great answer to some of what opponents would like to bring to counter that. Your Aaron Zhang, you have 2 Intimidate users, and better watch out for this, right? And then I haven't even mentioned the Yanma. I've been using Yanma in the PDL. I think it's the best D-tier Pokemon I've ever drafted. Again, this is a higher power format, but Yanma can do Compound Eyes Hypnosis to open holes for its teammates to set up. Nasty Plot, Iron Defense, Howl. Well, you probably don't want Howl next to Yanma. You don't get that much from it, but you still do get the attack boost on your own Gouging Fire. But also, of course, Yanma can run Speed Boost and Tailwind, and like Yanmega, it can be not a priority Tailwind setter, but after a boost or two, faster than the other non-priority Tailwind setters. So, I don't think this team is invincible or anything. No team is invincible, but you pretty much have everything you want from this team. This is an incredible draft. And you might be wondering at this point, if you're not familiar with the draft, how on earth is this not number 1? And the reason is number 1 is right here, the Immunity Idols, with just a powerhouse Rain team. They actually kind of remind me of the... what was that team from PDL Season 6 that Ninja Meerkat was coaching? What do you call that? The Scottish... No. The Dallas Dragapults. You just have like all the best Rain Pokemon here, except Tornadus, but they have Tornadus at home. So Pelipper can set Rain, right, with Drizzle. Okay. Opponents have their own weather. There's Drought out there, there's Priority Sunny Day, there's Priority Snowscape, there's Sandstream. Pelipper's not that strong a Pokemon. It's great for setting up Rain for its teammates, but is it really enough? Oh, you have Priority Rain Dance on Thundurus. And you have Fast Rain Dance on Mousehold if you want. And then you have just like, again, all the best rain abusers. Basculegion hits so hard in rain. It can't be stopped by Fake Out because it's a ghost type. Last Respects, if you save it for late in the game, is going to hit extremely hard as well. Our Chowdon, of course, difficult Pokemon to break through. Snowballs with Electroshot and Rain. Overquill. We saw Ninja Meerkat run Intimidate Overquill a lot, so you know that's an option. But it also gets Swift Swim. Its typing complements Basculegion nicely because it has that poison coverage to deal with opposing grass types. And it's a dark type, so yeah, opposing dark types are not going to have as easy a time with it as they do with Basculegion. Or Ghosts. So yeah, you get like maybe the two best Swift Swim Pokemon. You got our Chowdon. Mousehold can run Friend Guard and Follow Me to help those Pokemon. It can side Beat Up or Population Bomb into our Chowdon to set up the stamina boost. So now good luck to physical attackers trying to break through this. It can run Technician and Population Bomb to do its own damage, and then you just have a ton of offense. I called Thundurus Tornadus at home, but Thundurus is really good Pokemon. There's a reason it was the captain of my PDL Season 5 team. Again, it gets that priority Rain Dance. It doesn't get Tailwind, but it does get Speed Control with Electro Web and priority Thunder Wave. It gets priority Taunt, like Tornadus. It gets Wild Bolt Storm, which works like Bleak Wind Storm. So double target, perfect accuracy in rain, except it's electric type. And it has a chance to paralyze. You can run Nasty Plot Thundurus, and just have a ton of offense with this on the special side and these two on the physical side. Then, I mean, those first 6 Pokemon, they might get a lot of wins if you just bring them every single week, right? But then there is a Trick Room component with Weird Ear and Rhyperior. It's not the strongest Trick Room mode, but it's not the weakest. Weird Ear gets Intimidate. It's a Psychic type. It can help deal with fighting types that try to menace our Chowdon, Mousehold, Rhyperior. Then Thundurus and Basculegion can help with those as well, and Pelipper. But it enables the Rhyperior, which can hit very hard and be hard to take down with Solid Rock. It does have some exploitable weaknesses, but this is Scarlet and Violet. You can Terrastallize, and Rhyperior gets Lightning Rod, so it can redirect electric attacks away from Basculegion and Pelipper and do it passively, unlike Mousehold having to click Follow Me. So you can bring Rhyperior into the rain component, and it has a role there. You have a grass type to complement this water offense in Virizion, and Virizion can take a beat up from Mousehold, and it could be Terracotta at home. You could give your justified boost to Virizion. So, I mean, this is a rain team. It's just a powerhouse rain team. Like, it would not be that crazy. Well, okay, there's not really it would not have been that crazy to bring this in, like, Regulation F back when that was the actual VGC format. That's what I'm saying. You'd probably want Tornadus in that version, but Thundurus is such a good substitute. And yeah, Justified Virizion can boost and hit hard on the physical side. You got fast Swift Swim offense. You do have a Trick Room mode if you want. It's not the best. You have our Chowdon. I don't really understand what the Berserker is for. I guess Steely Spirit does boost our Chowdon's Flash Cannon, but I don't know what Berserker brings to the table otherwise. I mean, it probably gets Fake Out and stuff. But, yeah, this is just an overwhelmingly powerful team. And I don't know this coach at all. I'm going to be honest, I don't think I've ever heard of them before this draft. Most of these coaches are people I've at least heard of, and many of them I've watched over the years. I don't know this coach at all, but on draft alone, I think this has to be the favorite to win the championship. So, I've been talking for a while. Here's a summary for you. They released this tier list where the community can do power rankings if they want, and these are mine. I do think that if I went back through it, I might make some changes. I think that, again, the Miami Palafins and the Shoutcasting Sylveons might both be a little bit low. I could see if I were to revise this, I could see myself bumping that up a bit. And if I ever do updated power rankings, which right now I think I probably won't, but it's not impossible, I might account for that. And then I think there were a couple of teams here that I thought could be a little bit lower. The Mimikyus might have been one of those, and the Miami Palafins. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, I feel pretty good about these teams that I have up at the top, for sure. But again, there are 20 good drafts here, and I'm looking forward to watching as much of this content as I can. And in terms of who I'm rooting for this season, I think I have to make I mean, that's a tough choice too. But I think my top four in terms of rooting interest are my old favorite PokeTuber, PokeMMD. That's a +1 with the Baton Rouge Butterfrees because that's my favorite draft. And then, of course, the two teams that are representing my hometown of Toronto. So Sierra Dawn with the Maple Muse and Numb Nexus with the Tyrants. Those are the teams that I'm rooting for this season. But even that's kind of a tough choice because there's so many drafts that are so cool. Okay, I've gushed enough. You get it. I'm just really looking forward. Again, this takes me back several years. One of the reasons this channel is called Slowpoke Well is because I was watching this stuff 8-9 years ago, and it took me so long to start making content myself. But yeah, I'm about to watch PokeMMD play a draft league again. That really takes me back, and I'm really excited to watch, and that's why I made this video. I don't know if there will be any more content related to this league that I have no affiliation with, but I'm just really looking forward to it.